Hello, everybody. It's Mike. So, I want to ask you a question. Is codependence a real thing? Should we even be talking about it? As you know, I like to respond to comments because I like the dialogue that they create. So, if you're new to the channel, this channel is for non borderlines who have been or are currently in a romantic relationship with an untreated borderline, and the relationship is toxic to you. You are unhappy, or you're out of it and you're still unhappy. If you are dating or married to a borderline and you are happy, this channel is not for you. Please stop coming on here and climbing up my rear end because your relationship is great and you don't like what I have to say about borderlines. I'm happy for you. I seriously have no need to argue with you if you are happy in your relationship. Good on you. Keep doing it. That's not what this channel is for. And I am not a psychologist, psychiatrist. I'm not a trained healthcare professional. I'm just somebody who survived a very toxic relationship with an untreated borderline, and I am in a state of recovery from that. Meaning, I'm not in any pain, I'm not sad, I'm not angry, I don't miss them. I have nothing but love in my heart for that person. I have no anger towards them. I think I have a very balanced approach. I see it as a mental illness, and I see it as something that can be treated if they choose to take responsibility or are able to take responsibility. And I also see that anybody that's involved with a borderline is also a volunteer. However horrifically badly you may have honestly been victimized by your borderline partner, that you chose to be there. These are all things that have helped me. So the bottom line is, are you happy? This is my question for all of you. Are you happy? I've had at least 2 people ask me, demanding that I not ask that question. But what else is there in life? I don't see any other point. If you're not happy, I don't see any other point in being here. And my experience is that for those who choose to be happy, not that go into denial and pretend they're happy, but those who choose to be happy, even if they're unhappy, can be happy if they take full responsibility for everything in their lives. And then are willing to learn whatever new techniques or life strategies in order to gain that. And if you're willing to do absolutely everything in your power, including give up your old ideas and do things that you don't feed your ego at the moment, my experience is that you can be happy and you can have all of your dreams. I was in the midst of learning that and experiencing that, and I fell into the trap of a borderline, and I also was unconsciously looking for it. So this is where I come from. If you don't like any of it, feel free to watch another channel. You won't hurt my feelings. What I do is, if people leave comments, everybody can see your username and your comment. The whole world can read it. I think one of the things about social media is that people think that they're bulletproof, that they're anonymous, and they do and say things they wouldn't normally say if they were looking at you in the face. So if somebody leaves a comment that has something that I feel is worth talking about, I'm going to talk about it. You don't want me to talk about your comment? Don't leave it. If I think that you are missing some information and that I may have some information that might educate you to help you have a better life and be more happy, I'm going to share that with you. Bear in mind, I didn't come knocking on your door asking for your opinion, nor did I say, hey, can I start looking at your life? You chose to leave a comment. So you've given me information. With that information, I'm going to use it to promote further discussion about how to heal from the toxic pain that is caused by being in a romantic relationship with an untreated toxic borderline. If you are passive aggressive, I am going to tell you. There's one thing I can't stand, it's passive aggressiveness. I'm going to come at you with everything I have and expose that because I think it's as abusive, if not more abusive, than outright aggression. If you are in denial, I'm going to tell you because, if you're in denial, you're going to be in denial anyway. But for those watching, I'm going to pick apart what you say and I'm going to bring out what's really going on in your unconscious and what you're trying to say. And that's for other people. If you can benefit from it, great. If it bothers you, don't leave a comment. And if you're just outright aggressive and abusive, I'll just block you. Or if you become a giant pain in the rear end and you just want to keep arguing ad nauseum and saying your same point over and over again, at some point I'll block you just because I can't resist. When somebody, so it's just easier for me. I've made my point once or twice. There's no point in belaboring it. So, somebody on here left a comment. I'm glad this person left 2 comments because in the second comment, this person was a little more cooperative. So I changed my thought. At first, I was going to really come at this, and I'll tell you why it bothers me. So first and foremost, let me just say that I do believe that codependency is a real thing. I believe that codependency, regardless of how you define it, functionally, when somebody is regressed in their codependency, they are functioning as though they had a full-blown mental illness. They do crazy, stupid things, and they can be in this regress state for their entire life. And they can do things that will completely, totally destroy their lives, as well as be abusive and destructive to others. So I really don't care what word you use to define it. I have interest in things like the difference between an actual mental illness and an emotional dysfunction. I don't care if something is a reaction or if something is something endemic within you. My experience with codependency is that if you end up functioning as a codependent, that tendency was already inside of you and at the very least was awakened. And I think that was partially kind of what happened with me, even though I already, had codependent, innards to begin with. But mine was stimulated and awakened in a way it never had been when I met the borderline that I'm no longer with. So I don't really care what you call it. And there's been, to my surprise, my absolute surprise, I thought that when I started this channel, I was going to be constantly fending off attacks from borderlines. And that hasn't been the case. There's been a few borderlines untreated that have come at me and said horrible things, and I blocked them. But the majority of my online wrangling is with people who have functioned as codependents. And they really don't want to be labeled as a codependent. They can't stand it. And I don't know why that is. I mean, maybe because they don't want to see themselves as being weak or being sick, or they're far more interested in how people see them than they are in whether or not they're happy and functional in their life. That's been my experience so far. So like I said, I don't care if you think codependence is a mental illness or a dysfunction or a temporary reaction. I don't care. Even if you call it a temporary reaction, there are people who live in that temporary reaction their entire lives, if not for decades at a time. And there are people who are insecure and who don't respect boundaries and don't have any boundaries and are constantly controlling and passive aggressive. And these are the people who usually end up with borderlines. So, having said that, there's a comment here I want to respond to. So this person says, this is a comment from a well-known psychologist in New York when I asked a question on Quora. If you don't know what Quora is, by the way, please don't try and get actual valuable knowledge from Quora because, anybody can say anything. But anyway, this is a question asked on Quora regarding codependent and borderline. Quote, this was the question this person asked. So where do codependents come into this? The answer, quote, they don't. In the object relations diagnostic system that I am trained in, codependency is a strategy, not a personality disorder. The term actually comes from Alcoholics Anonymous, not psychology, and referred to someone who enabled the alcoholic to drink because it suited their needs. It has morphed over time into an unofficial term for dependency. So, a lot of things about this I don't like. First off, the best way to get a response out of me, the good response, is to share yourself. So this person doesn't say, hi, I am a partner or an ex-partner of a borderline. That tells me who you are. So I don't know if this is, I can only assume that this is coming from a partner of a borderline. You don't state your feelings about it. Like, you talk about codependency in such a way, I don't like that, or I'm not comfortable with that, or I don't agree with that, or I'm confused about it. You don't share any of your thoughts or your feelings or your experience. So you've set this up to be just an argument about definitions. You triangulate by saying, here's a comment from a well-known psychologist. So that automatically puts you in a state of superiority and puts me at, I have to try and climb up to defend my position. Because this is obviously in response to me stating that codependence is a very real, like I said, I don't care what you call it. I don't care if you call it a personality disorder, a mental illness, an emotional condition, a trauma reaction. I don't care what you call it. The end result is you end up acting as though you're nuts and you do really stupid self-destructive things to yourself, and you spend your life in horrible conditions, and it's like being with a borderline, whether you call it codependent or not, being a partner of a borderline. If you stay with them and they're untreated, your life goes to shit and you suffer tremendously. And so I don't care what word you call it, the end result is the same. You might as well be insane because the end result is the same, right? So you've triangulated, you say this psychologist, well-known psychologist in New York, the haven of psychology, this person says codependence doesn't exist. But so that's the first thing that I have a problem with, and let's just, look, you also know, because this also isn't, this whole thing, to be honest with you, this whole comment is just sort of like a fart. It's like somebody farted in a room full of people, and it's just, we all got to sit there and smell it. We don't really know what to do with it, but it's just going to sit there and hang in the air. And that's because you haven't taken any responsibility or said what it is that your position is or what you want to accomplish in the discussion. It's just, it's almost, I don't know, maybe you just didn't put enough, but it could definitely be a passive aggressive sort of, yeah, well, so-and-so says. You know what I mean? It's cheap. It's cheap to do that. Unless you say, listen, I've been really confused, or, then we have context. But the other thing is that you also know you could go online, and so could I. Go and get comments from well-known psychologists who will talk about codependency as a real thing. So this is cheap. You found one person out of context to say something, and you haven't even revealed why you threw it out there. You just sort of farted and walked out of the room. All right, so your question on Quora, it's not like it's Quora for anyway. So where do and by the way, how do I know what does that mean, well-known psychologist? You didn't give the psychologist's name, so none of us know who it is. Just because somebody is well-known, does that mean they're good at what they do? Anyway, so your question was, so where do codependents come into this, meaning codependence and borderlines? And the response is they don't. So what does that mean they don't? Of course they do. Does he mean that there aren't partners of borderlines that suffer? Of course there are. So obviously they do. So this isn't about whether or not codependence exists or the partner, the caretaker, the trauma responder. They obviously exist. But this is really about, we're going to find out just about intellectual definitions. So where do codependents come into this? And again, I don't even know the context of the conversation. Have you taken out it's a cheap comment. Come on, you guys can do better than that. This person has, like I said, has left some cooperative comments, so I'm not out to get you, but this isn't a helpful interchange. So they don't. In the object relations diagnostic system that I am trained in, codependency is a strategy, not a personality disorder. First off, I've never said it was a personality disorder. I don't care whether it is or not. It functions like one. My experience and my observation is that it isn't a personality disorder because, for instance, borderline personality disorder, we're talking about something fundamental within the deepest, I would say at the core of the psyche that is actually broken. And there's genetic factors, and there's neurological factors, and there's, all kinds of other things. So, there are people that are born, in healthy families that are perfectly healthy and are, schizophrenic, not necessarily caused by anything. So if personality disorder fits within that, I'm okay with codependence not being a personality disorder. Does that change the fact that it debilitates somebody's life? Does it change the fact that people are miserable and commit suicide over it? It doesn't change any of those things. This intellectual hair splitting means nothing in terms of the reality of, do people who function as codependents chronically, are they happy? Hell no, they're not. So it doesn't mean anything. We're just splitting hairs. And again, I think the only reason we're splitting hairs is because you don't like the term and you're looking for ammunition so that you don't have to fall into the very clear statement that I have made, which is that anybody who has been in a romantic relationship with a untreated borderline for more than 24 or 48 hours is by definition a codependent. And as I've said, which is not in any disagreement to anything this guy has said, codependency is a relationship dynamic where you end up taking on you end up taking on responsibilities, and you end up losing your boundaries and dealing with things you would not normally have to deal with in a normal relationship. So that's my definition. You want to call it a personality disorder? Great. You want to call it a strategy? You want to call it a reaction? I don't care. The bottom line is that people who are saddled with this are miserable, and it can be actually life-threatening. And whether, if you don't want to be seen as somebody who has some kind of mental or emotional or psychological dysfunction, then I'm going to be even that much more hard on you. Like, what the hell were you doing? If you're really that put together and you have that much choice over your life, why are you still complaining? Why were you with them for 10 or 20 years? Why did you not get the hint the first couple of times? Something's broken. And whatever the cause of that brokenness, I don't care. It only makes you look worse. It makes you look either just outright stupid or that you want to cause yourself harm, because if what you're saying is, I don't have a problem, there's nothing wrong with me, I don't have any lack of awareness, I'm just a trauma responder, or I'm reacting. This is my strategy. Why wasn't your strategy to get the hell out? It doesn't bode well for you to say, at least if there's, like some of the borderlines on here have said, I don't like the word mental illness, but I'll take it over, whatever was going on before, because at least it explains why I couldn't help myself in these, the kinds of behaviors. And the codependent is powerless. That's the whole point. They don't have enough power to stop and go, hang on, this isn't working, I'm going to get out. So again, I don't care what you call it. And I've never said it was a personality disorder. So you throw that in there as though I've been calling codependence a personality disorder. I've never called it that. And then he goes on to say that, first off, he says that this is the diagnostic system. It's a diagnostic system that he is trained in. It doesn't tell me that his opinion on it. That doesn't give me, it's not like he said, I was trained in this, but I've learned through experience that. I was trained in this diagnostic system, and my experience has proven to me that this is actually a superior. He's just saying that's what he's been taught, that's what he knows, that's what he does. That doesn't tell me anything about his effectiveness as a psychologist, because, look, before Freud came into existence, there was no such word as the unconscious mind. And he threw that out there, and that was not part of the diagnostic system of that day. In fact, he was looked upon as, and to this day, people look upon him as being, a whack job. And Jung as well. Not everybody's a Jungian psychologist. I'm not a psychologist, but my psychotherapist is Freudian and Jungian. And so this is where I get all these terms from. So that would probably make me Jungian, although I don't know, because I'm a syncretist. I'm also based off of my experience as well. So this has not shown that this guy has the ability to learn from experience. Maybe he is. He just hasn't expressed any opinion. So that's all he said is, this is what I've learned in my system. It doesn't take away the validity or lack of validity. Again, please, guys, the reason why I ask you to state where you are and to state your opinion and your emotional reaction, and I won't get on your case for your thoughts or your feelings. It's because it creates and fosters critical thinking. This move here is not a critical thinking move. Because critical thinking starts with the understanding that we all have an emotional agenda, and that our attachment to our emotional agenda has the potential to skew whether or not we evaluate information accurately. We also, if we're going to employ critical thinking, there are 3 questions. When is something 100% true and 100% false? When is something partially true and partially false? When is something sometimes true and sometimes false? So you're throwing this out. You're not analyzing it. You obviously have, at the very least, best scenario, you have a question for me and you haven't asked it. You didn't say, Mike, what do you think of what this guy has to say? You haven't shared your opinion, which is, I don't like the idea of being a codependent, and this guy backs me up. You just, like I said, you fart and walk out of the room. We all have to sit there and smell it and decide whether we like the smell or not. So that's his diagnostic system. He doesn't share that he has learned anything different or that his experience tells him anything. He only says, and that tells me that maybe you took this out of context. Like, from a psychological perspective, in the literature, what do they say about codependency? Again, I don't know what this guy's thought about it is or not. So that's his diagnostic system that he's trained in. Codependency is a strategy, not a personality disorder. Again, I don't care. It's obviously not an effective strategy. It's a strategy used by somebody who's not in full awareness and full control of how they live their life. Because if it was an effective strategy, that effective strategy would be to get the hell out. So whether it's a strategy or not, so what? Right? Then he goes on to say the term actually comes from Alcoholics Anonymous, not psychology. Well, Alcoholics Anonymous actually has revolutionized psychology, and Alcoholics Anonymous actually has a strong association with Jungian and Freudian psychology. So all he's saying here is that the term is a new term, relatively speaking. And Alcoholics Anonymous came into existence in the 1930s, so it's almost 100 years old. So it's not even really that young. It's been around for a long time, and just because it's not part of his diagnostic system could be out of date. But any science, psychology, archaeology, physics, is always evolving. Just because, what somebody thought 100 years ago doesn't necessarily mean that you don't evolve and introduce new concepts. So that doesn't mean anything either. So the term comes from Alcoholics Anonymous. As I said, Alcoholics Anonymous has revolutionized psychiatry and psychology, and referred to someone who enabled the alcoholic to drink because it suited their needs. That's not entirely true. Suited their needs minimizes it, but that's not entirely true. I don't know if this is true or not. I'm going to accept this as true, that codependency was a term that was invented during the time of Alcoholics Anonymous. Fine. Referred to someone who enabled the alcoholic. That's true. And again, so what? That's not a good thing. Again, the same thing should have happened there. Wow, you drink a lot. I'm not marrying you. It has morphed over time into an unofficial term for dependency. No, it's an official term. His diagnostic system may not recognize it, but it is an official term. Now, again, you've taken one quote out of context from online. You and I both know I could go on right now as I'm making this video and come up with as many psychologists who will talk about this in terms as though it's a real thing. Whether or not they call it, whatever they call it, won't change anything. So, look, this kind of stuff isn't going to fly on my channel. If you want to have a discussion, what I would want from you is to state who you are in the dynamic. Are you a partner, an ex-partner? Are you a borderline? What are your thoughts and your feelings about it? You're obviously responding to something I've said. So refer to what I've said, and I haven't said many of these things I haven't said. I've never said that it was a personality disorder. And tell me your feelings. If you have a question, say, Mike, what do you think about this? If you want to have an opposing opinion, say, Mike, I'm going to take an opposing opinion here, which was going to stimulate me to want to respond. So, if we're going to treat this like a group therapy, which it's not entirely because I'm really doing all the talking here, but if we're going to treat this like a group therapy group, then own it. State who you are, state what your position is and what your feeling is and what you want out of it. Don't just this comes across passive aggressive. Okay? So that's it. Now let me go back to the original question. Are you happy? If you're happy and your life is good and you don't have any pain left over, you don't have any anger, you don't have any resentment, you don't have any mourning or any loss, you don't have a scar. People talk about they walk around with a scar. If you are perfectly functional and happy and you don't see yourself as a codependent, I'll co-sign that for you. If you are in pain still, I'm not judging you if you are. If you are in pain, if you're still limping along in life, if you have a habit of being taken advantage of and making yourself available to people to abuse you and take advantage of you, if you are still in pain and can't find love, if you can't, if you don't have good physical health, Like you have these like, all those kinds of disorders that people have that doctors don't know what the hell caused them, but stress might be, so you're emotionally upset, you can't sleep at night, if all that stuff is going on and you're unhappy, then maybe it's a good idea to take a look at your definitions and if it helps you or not. I am here to tell you that as a codependent, I have a deficit. Now, I am in a state of recovery, which means that I'm currently not regressed. I'm not in a relationship, a codependent relationship. But, I have that within me. And if I don't do the maintenance, I could fall into that strategy or reaction or trauma response at any time. If you're not happy, then, having an ego about a definition of a word and whether or not it applies to you doesn't really help you, does it? If you're on this channel, it's probably because there's something I've said that you found to be helpful. So why not listen to what I have to say? Getting angry with me isn't going to solve anything. I'm not going to change my opinion just because you have a different one. And if you come to the conclusion that what I'm saying isn't helpful for you, then go someplace else. If you come to the conclusion that some of what I say helps you and other of it you don't like and doesn't apply to you, then take what works for you and get rid of the rest. If you want to discuss it, I'm happy to discuss it. But, when somebody farts in a room and walks out, I'm going to tell you, man, who farted? I'm going to open the door and say, do you realize you just farted and walked out? So anyway, as I said, you've left some other comments which I found to be, cooperative. So I don't really know what was going on. But anyway, it gave me an excuse to point out codependency. So again, if you are in pain still, I have a 3-step process. First, before we get into that, if you are in a toxic relationship with an untreated borderline, my suggestion for you is to get out. They suffer from a mental illness. They're not just somebody with problems. The twist of their mental illness is that they lull you into a false sense of security, making you think that you're loved and safe, and then the very thing that they want to elicit from you, which is the love and the intimacy, will be the cause for them to turn around and leave you. The insanity is that you're going to continue to think that it's going to eventually get better, that they'll eventually learn how to love you, and then it'll all be okay. And the truth is that no, if they do have this mental illness, then the end result is only that they will leave you, and they will leave you and destroy your sense of self. It never gets better. It only gets worse. And the insanity part for your end is that it looks like it's getting better and we're getting deeper, and then all that happens is it gets worse and worse and worse. So the kindest thing you can do for yourself is get out. The kindest thing you can do for the borderline is to tell them, I love you. This relationship is harmful to me. And if you want me in your life, then I would like you to go see a therapist for borderline personality disorder for a year. At the end of that year, if you still want me in your life, let me know, and we can go and meet your therapist together and see where we go from there. The reason why I say that is because that is the kindest thing you can do for them. Truth is, if they are a borderline, it's going to take a lot more than a year before they're going to be able to have a functional relationship. And again, this is if you're in a toxic relationship. If you're a borderline and you've been in a relationship and things are great, then this doesn't apply to you. So don't get your panties in a bunch. My 3-step process, if you want what I have, if you don't want what I have, do what you need to do. But if you're desperate and you need something, I've done something that's worked for me. You have nothing to lose by giving it a try. If it doesn't work for you, you can go back to whatever you were doing before. My 3-step approach, which I did not make up, is number 1, therapy with a qualified psychologist who can deal with codependence from cluster B personalities relationships. Number 2, 12 steps. Work those 12 steps and go to Codependence Anonymous. You can go to coda.org, coda.org right now, and you can find online Zoom meetings today. and you can find somebody who will help you walk you through the steps, work that fourth step and that 10th step on a regular basis. And then the third thing is to have a spiritual practice, whether that's going to church or going to meditation or practicing Tai Chi, or I don't care what it is. It has to be a discipline, something that you do, that you practice. Those are the three things: therapy, 12 steps, and spiritual discipline. You do those on a regular basis, you will heal. If you don't, in my experience, some people can heal, but it takes a long time. Some people sort of heal, but they have this scab and this scar that they have to kind of limp around with. And then there's a lot of people who never heal from this. And I have seen people who have been like in decades-long relationships with kids and marriage with borderlines. I've seen it not only destroy their life, but actually cause them physical illness, like life-threatening physical illnesses. I've seen it. So this is a very serious thing. So don't leave it alone. That's my experience. Now, because I've been doing this kind of stuff my whole life, and I fell into this, and then I was able to, take responsibility, thankfully, put enough of a boundary down that my borderline destroyed the relationship to such a degree, thankfully, that I could never go back and repair it. And so then I went completely no contact, and I dove into that three-pronged approach, and I didn't think I was ever going to recover, and within a couple of months I was back to my normal self again. And that's where I'm at now. And if you want what I have, that's the way to do it, in my experience. So this link up here, I'm eventually going to do something with it. I know it's taking longer than I thought it was, but I am going to put together something. I'm going to try and make sure I'm not just repeating myself, but that it's something where I share my method, my approach, without trying to be a counselor or without trying to teach you the 12 steps. Just the stuff that I've done. And when I get that up, I'll let you know. Until then, I'm going to keep saying what I'm saying. And if you have comments or questions, please feel free to leave them. Just be aware that, I'm going to respond however I'm going to respond. Don't take it personally. All right, that's it. Talk to you guys next time. Oh, by the way, the poor little borderline over here is crying because you have not subscribed yet. So when you mouse over her little face and subscribe, she will immediately be healed, and you can go to bed and get through the rest of your day knowing that you finally saved the one borderline who you can save. It's that one right there. All right. Talk to you guys later.